In most jobs, maternity leave means someone covers your desk. In this business, there is no one else. The desk, the delivery, the brand, it's all you. So this isn't about planning for a baby. It's about planning for the version of your business that has to survive a season where the one thing it's always run on, you, live, showing up, isn't available. And underneath logistics, there's a quieter fear most people never say out loud. Will people forget me? Will someone else fill the gap while I'm out? Will I come back to an audience that's actually moved on? Here's what I want to do with you today. First, I want to name that fear properly because it's not really about the maternity leave itself. It's about a belief that you and the business are some fragile thing and that if one of you goes quiet, so does the other. Second, I want to walk through the specific pressure that comes with being the face, being the brand, and the delivery all in one. The guilt of needing help, the comparison to founders who never seem to stop. And third, I'm going to give you the exact framework I use with my own clients to prepare you for this. 4 things to build before you go, so the business can hold steady without needing you to prove that you're irreplaceable to do it. Because here's the thing that nobody tells you. A business that needs your nonstop presence to survive isn't the strong version of a business. The strong version isn't the one that doesn't collapse the one time you step back. And that's exactly what we're building today. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome back to Ambitious. Today, we're talking all things maternity leave, and I want to preface something really quickly. Going into today's topic, I know your brain is thinking, Kate, how many kids do you have? And you would be right, I don't have any kids. But the one thing that is my job, it literally is the definition of my success with clients, is helping someone, regardless of their circumstances, to be able to succeed in business. The reality is, whether you are someone yourself who already is a mom and you're looking forward to welcoming another child to your family, or you're somebody who's maybe a first-time mom and you've never been through this before. One of the things that is literally my purpose in the businesses that I consult with is to help them to navigate things and understand how to structure the business for the life they want. For some people, they want to have certain hours because they want to travel the world. For other people, they want certain hours because they have a cutoff because they have tennis practice 3 nights a week, and that's a really important thing for them in their life. In serving mainly women, I am living in my ideal clients becoming moms, some for the first time and some expanding their family. And so one of the things that I am constantly in and helping people with is to navigate how do I plan for maternity leave. And today's episode is actually inspired, in fact, from one of my good friends who is becoming a first-time mom. And she is someone that I've been chatting with, and she's been saying, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on that? And it's been really interesting because through the conversations with her, I realized this is not really talked about, right? We see women who post the pregnancy announcement, and then we see people who are now operating a business with a baby. And everybody's thinking, how did you get here? What did you do? Did you take time off? Did you not take time off? Did you put money into a savings account for 2 years before you did this? Are you still taking a salary from the business, just a lower salary? And all these questions come up, and none of us really have the full picture of how are people doing it. We're seeing that they've got kids and they've got a business, but no one really talks about the literal logistics of how they made it happen. And as somebody who has helped so many women to outline plans, and most specifically, plans that all look very different. I have had some clients that after having a baby have come back in a matter of less than 12 weeks, maybe some of them even 8 weeks. Others I have helped and they've been off, disconnected from their business, and really having someone else operate it for the better part of a year and a half post having a baby. So this is also a topic I wanted to discuss because I think there's also a misunderstanding that there is a one way of doing this, that there is a one way of this is what it's supposed to look like as a woman in business who wants to have or grow her family. And so today we're going to walk through a couple different things that are going to give you resources to really know, okay, here's what my different options would be. Here's creative solutions that we have. And here's maybe how I'm going to figure out what actually makes most sense for me. One of the first things that I want to note is that as much as there is a logistical problem to be solved when it comes to being a woman in business who wants to have or expand her family, there's also as much a reality to the mental game that is there, right? I was talking to someone, they said, I'm so frustrated by the idea that men get to have a family and have kids and they never even necessarily have to take time off. It was so frustrating to her. And I said, there is as much a mindset to this as anything else. Your perspective of how you see maternity leave, how you see taking time off, and how much time you want to take off, all of that is just as much mindset as it is strategy. And I think one of the biggest fears that I hear is that people worry that if they step back, not even to be disappearing, but just to reduce their time within the business, that they fear that it will make them basically disappear, that they're worried that if they're not constantly posting, if they're not constantly showing up, that basically they're going to get wiped away from being a product online. They're going to be removed from people's awareness, that people are going to forget that they exist, that they're not going to become as relevant or as important. And there's a deep, deep fear that comes with, what does that mean? What does that look like? And how do I feel about the idea that, yeah, maybe I'm not going to be as present or as online as I once was? And again, for some people, they consistently post too, but it's the question of, how do I feel about this idea of why I'm picking the plan that I am? And with this, it also sometimes doesn't just feel like a schedule change. I think there's this misconception that when you plan for mat leave, it just means that you're changing your schedule. What a lot of women feel is it feels threatening. It feels threatening to delegate a portion of your business that maybe you've been living in for a while to somebody else. It feels at times threatening to give away your marketing when you really wanted to be involved in it, but feeling like you maybe just don't have the capacity to do so. So a lot of women I talk to, a lot of our conversations are around fears of how clients will respond, fears of, is it too much time? Is it not enough time? When do I announce that I am having a baby? Should I tell clients early on? Do I have to wait to tell clients? Does it matter when I tell clients? And all of those other questions. So the quiet fear, oftentimes, especially for people who are the brand, who are a personal brand, are going to come from the fact that you probably in some respect have been the Energizer bunny behind this. You've been the leadership that's been leading your team. You've probably in some respect maybe been the face of your marketing. So you've been the person who's been showing up and who's been really headlining marketing and sales, the one who's getting on calls, the one who's doing maybe client check-ins or client meetings. And when you start to think about the idea of the potential, not even say that you're going to, but the potential of stepping back, it starts to become really scary because we start to think, okay, well, what does that mean? I've been in these 7 buckets until now, and then I'm considering not being in those 7 buckets. What does that mean for me? Or what is that going to look like? And there's obvious signs of just operating from fear, which is just like this idea of mass batching across everything. Like I'm going to pre-plan all my launches. I'm going to pre-plan all my content. I'm going to pre-plan everything, like everything. I have to assume that I'm non-functional and I'm going to have to pre-plan everything. And in some respects, planning ahead is good, but you also want to make sure that we're not planning for catastrophe. We're planning for a modified version of how you've been operating until now. And I think we have a lot of these conversations inside my mastermind because a lot of the women in there are moms, and there's also women that are becoming new moms that are in that mastermind. And one of the things that there was a common consensus of amongst every single woman who's in that program is the fact that everyone felt differently post-baby. Every single person, when they went into their mat leave, was talking about what they thought it was going to be, how they thought it was going to look, how they thought they were going to feel. And then there was the version of them post-baby, which was how I actually feel and what it actually looks like for me and how I actually want to operate the business. And there was 2 different flavors of women who had totally polarizingly different perspectives. The one woman planning maternity leave was the person who was like, I'm going to take tons of time off. I want all the time off. I want to be home with my baby. I don't want to go back to work any earlier than absolutely necessary. There was also another woman though, when she planned for her maternity leave, she's like, Kate, I was home for a couple weeks and I found myself itching to get out into the real world, to have adult conversations again. And I just found myself wanting to dive back into work. I was excited to get back into work. And it didn't take me months or a year. It literally was in a matter of weeks. I wanted to get back into the swing of things. So some women wish they had more time and others feel like they didn't need as much time nor want as much time. So I think it's looking at as well, when we go into planning, it also means that we're planning really only from the perspective and the evidence of how we think we're going to feel today, instead of giving ourselves options that in the event that post-baby our perspective changes, we haven't given ourselves this like gridlock perspective of how it has to look or how it has to operate from day one. We've given ourselves a variety of different ways that we can navigate. And that's also because, again, I just have so much evidence to say that the women I talked to thought going in that they would feel and want one thing. And upon having the baby, have realized sometimes that they were correct and others have realized they were way off and now have been scrambling to create a plan. And that's because the plan that oftentimes they created was too rigid. So the goal is to create a little bit of fluidity, of needing to look at, okay, not only the version of you right now, but the version of you that's going to become a mom or a mom again, looking at what do you feel like you need and what if what you need changes from the structure you've set up today. So oftentimes when we have a business and we get this amazing news that we're having a baby, it's like pressure. My clients will look at, okay, well, what does this mean? And how do I navigate this? And what decision? And how do I communicate to you? So first I have to look at, okay, like what is the pressure that they're feeling? The first is the disappearing pressure, which is the idea that the fear of stepping away means in some way that you will become less relevant. You can become replaced. You can be somebody that as a result of your space from online and from the internet internet are going to somehow be erased from online and people will forget about you. And typically, the disappearing pressure comes in when you feel like you're still months out and already looking at the fact that you're going to be forgotten and that you're going to be somebody that nobody remembers and you're going to get disappeared off the internet. And ultimately, what I see is that a lot of women who have fears around visibility and time and presence and pressure, they will look at things and say to me, I am just freaking out. Like my due date is this and it feels like it's coming up so fast. And they start to have a lot of fear around the due date and it approaching. And also with this, there's a lot of just in case conversations. And again, typically out of a place of panic. It's not a matter of, okay, we're going to create this structure and here's why we're creating it the way that we are. And here's what it will look like in the event that this needs to be executed or this needs to be executed. It's not always talked about from a grounded place. It's looked at from a perspective of, okay, like I have to think of every single thing that's ever going to go wrong and I have to make a plan for that. And it's panic. So what I tell people is, listen, you want to first be grounded when you're making plans, which is to say, what is, yes, the best case scenario and what is the worst case scenario? But the reality is you're not disappearing from the face of the earth. You're somebody who's going to have a modified way in which you're approaching your business. So what we're going to look at is we're going to look at creating different systems and structures to think of these scenarios. But the reality is we're not going to think of every scenario that could happen. We're not going to think about every one-off thing that could happen if this client quits, if this team member quits, because some of those things are not going to happen. And if they did happen, you would have resources to figure it out. But sometimes when we go down that rabbit hole, we create this reality where we actually make the scenario of us taking time off feel a lot bigger and a lot more intense than it actually needs to be. And so this is also when I see people who will message me at 12 o'clock at night because they're worried about something, or they'll message at 6 o'clock in the morning being like, hey, I was thinking about this, and I want to make a plan for it. Or the people who they hate the question of, so what's your plan for when baby comes? And that question and someone asking them instantly creates anxiety and they start to feel it in their body and their brain starts racing. I don't know what my plan is. I don't know what I'm doing. And you get overwhelmed. And sometimes the preparedness for maternity leave, sometimes the pressure comes from just how much do I have in the bank, right? So how much banked content do I have? That's my level of readiness. How much banked money do I have? That's my level of readiness. And the one thing I can tell you is obviously from all of my friends and all of my peers and clients who've had kids, sometimes kids are planned. And sometimes you have this beautiful plan of we're starting a family and you have this schedule. And many of us know that we know people, or maybe even yourself, you have a family that you're like, well, it wasn't planned, but we got a plan. There's this lens of sometimes it's not always perfect to a timeline, but it's also perfect in its own way, in its own timeline. And so I think also this idea that everything is so controllable, right? That everything has to look this certain way is also what adds additional pressure. The other thing that also I think I see as a really core thing is this kind of almost like pressure of needing help, or like a guilt of needing help, like this idea of anticipatory guilt, because you know you're going to have to hand things off. And maybe even if it's a matter of clients, like I know some of my agency owners that I've helped with mat leave, they've said, well, Kate, I'm really nervous because my clients signed up thinking that they were going to get consult and be working with me. And now I'm disappearing. And so are they going to be upset? And what does that mean? And they start to go into this rabbit hole of, oh my gosh, like I am the product. Like if I'm not there, then my clients are all going to leave me and no one's going to stay. And I've seen the total opposite to be true. Like I've got one client I'm thinking of, she went on mat leave and she thought she was going to take 3 months and she ended up taking 9 months. And I remember she came to me with this exact fear. Everybody's going to leave. No one's going to want to work with me if I'm not the person who's doing XYZ. And it was just like all this fear discussion. I said to her, you were never the product in the first place. Your team has the ability, the same way that you do, to be able to serve your clients. So your perspective that you are the product is actually part of the problem here, because the client hasn't said you're the product. You believe you're the product. And now you're projecting that belief onto your team and onto your clients that are current and new clients. So I said, what would it look like if you weren't the value of the offer? If you weren't the value of the package, of the delivery? And one of the things that we started to unpack was she had guilt in stepping away because she believed that if she stepped away, there was no value to the offer. There was no value to, oh, people won't stay, they'll quit, they'll leave. And fast forward, 2 clients out of 32 clients left upon her going on mat leave. Everybody else was perfectly taken care of. Everybody else got served. Everybody else's payments came in. Nothing changed. And so one of the things we had to let go of is that she had this guilt and this shame of not being there. She had shame of not being in person with her team. She had guilt about the fact that someone else was going to be handling things. She was starting to also kind of feel resistance and avoidance in having that conversation with her team of, yeah, I'm going to be off. You guys are going to drive this ship. You guys are going to own this. It was this feeling of, I feel like I'm abandoning them. I feel like I'm leaving them on their own. And even with this, because there was this like denial in a way of what it was going to need, she put off hiring a team. She put off delegating and getting the right people in place because she felt a guilt and a shame around the fact that she was going to need more help. So it really came down to this idea of like, where does that guilt come from? Where does that shame come from? And I think as women, I obviously, as I said, don't have children, but a lot of my peers do, a lot of my clients do, and a lot of my friends do. And so I think that there's this belief of like, we should be able to do it all, right? I shouldn't need help. I shouldn't need to take more than X amount of time. I can do this. I can get back in there and get back on the field in this amount of time. And honestly, the reality is you probably can. It's not even to say that you can't get back on the field and you can't get back in the game within a certain amount of time. It's actually not to say that that's not possible. The reality is you also have to ask yourself, do you want to? Are you doing and getting back onto the field and getting back in the game of entrepreneurship and back into the business from a place of desire? Or are you doing it because you truly believe on some level that you should be able to handle all that you should be able to work and have a baby and just do it all? And I think some women that I've seen have a guilt and a shame around not being able to do more, and a guilt and a shame for maybe having a different level of capacity than they thought they would, or potentially changing their mind. And so it all comes down to the fact that we have this guilt and the shame of needing help and needing support. And I think the third is the fact that we have this pressure, which really comes from hustle culture comparison, in my opinion, which is your maternity leave shouldn't be based off of someone else that you consume online and how fast she came back. I follow a lot of amazing moms, and I have peers that are amazing moms that I follow online. And one mom disappeared for a year and a half, like literally didn't post at all, came back with her babies and got right back into the work. That was fine. Then another one had a baby and came back within, I want to say 5 weeks. Like it was fast. In my opinion, it was fast. And I was like, whoa, okay, cool. Love that. Came back within 5 weeks and she's got her baby on her hip and she's doing calls and she's posting content and she's right back in the game. But the reality is you've got one woman who wants a year off after a baby and you've got one woman who took 5 weeks off. The best part is neither of these are wrong, but you have to ask yourself, are you getting back into business from a true place of desire? Or are you doing so because we believe that you should be back at it in a certain amount of time? And also, who determined that time? Who determined how fast is right for you to get back into it? There's also, let's just be really honest about this, there's also a reality here of your business. Some people that you're following online have a certain business structure that allows them to not be in their business as fast, right? Some people have the float, they've got the savings, they've got the team so that things can operate and they can run and they can work without that person being present. In other businesses, they're not at a place when maternity leave happens where they're maybe as mature or they're as established or they're as structured that allows that to be possible. So when we compare our maternity leave and our plan to what we're seeing of other people online without the full context of maybe what was behind them, did they have partner support? Did they have financial support? Was the business at a certain stage? Was there a certain amount of monthly recurring revenue that it had? There's so many things that we're not privy to. So when you are someone who's watching someone else's journey and you're using that as your North Star from which to make your plan, it's a very dangerous place to be because it means that you're potentially using evidence and information that's not actually accurate and also may not even be anywhere close to the reality of what you yourself are experiencing. So this means that we need to make sure that we are looking at the evidence of what makes sense for us and making sure that we are not making plans off of somebody else. You should not be designing your leave for having a baby or expanding your family based off of what you believe or perceive is quote unquote acceptable. This is the other thing I'm seeing with the idea of hustle culture and comparison is we have this preconceived idea of what's normal. If I said to you, okay, what if you had a baby this year and you decided after that you wanted to take 2 years of reduced work and step back and have the first 2 years off with your baby? Do you feel anxiety about that? You're like, well, 2 years, it's a long time, Kate. 2 years, I don't know. The reality is, where are you getting your point of reference? Where are you getting the point of this is what's normal? Now, again, obviously that's connected to a level of privilege to be able to take that time. But the reality is, if you are somebody that wants to take more time, you can do that. The issue is as women, I think many of us have these points of reference. We have points of normal, points of typical. And And then when we feel like we veer from it, there's a deeper part in us, which feels like this need to prove, this need in some of us to prove that I can get back at it, to prove that I can get back in there. And again, I'm not really somebody who cares a lot about what it looks like, because what it looks like is entirely up to you. What I care about is the intention. So if you say you want to get right back into work, talk me through why. Talk me through what your mindset is. Not that it's right or wrong, just tell me why. If you're somebody who feels like you want to take space and take lots of time and you feel like, well, I have to downsize the business, talk to me about that. Tell me about that. Because what I do when someone says, here's my plans and here's what I'm thinking, is I try to unpack and get to the root of where does that belief come from? Because sometimes the plan is built off of a belief that's borrowed, right? When we're building our maternity leave, we have to ask ourselves, is that belief of how long I need, what it's going to look like, how I want to approach it truly mine? Or is it potentially something that I've borrowed from somebody else? And so we have to know that in order to be able to go into the strategy piece. So I want to break down now strategically, what do we do? Okay. There's so many things that we could do, should do. Everyone says and has a different opinion. What the heck do I do? What's the right way? So first is your offer itself. You need to have an offer that does not require you to live. Now, I fully recognize, even myself as somebody who has a personal brand, I facilitate in my mastermind, I facilitate with private clients. The reality is that yes, there is a lot of circumstances where you are part of the product in some way right now. But if you have time, even if you're pregnant right now, or if you are planning to in the future and you want to get ahead, the goal is to look to structure the offer in a way that doesn't require you in order for it to exist. So you're going to look at, with your offer and your business, what are the pieces right now that are essential for the business to exist and for the business to maintain? And the other thing you want to ask yourself in that is, which of those things is something that is done out of habit versus which of those things is done out of true necessity? This is the one where I find most people are not able to be objective, which is why you typically need somebody else. Because I've had people say, well, I have to do the client kickoffs. That's what I do. I have to do that. And I was like, play with me here. Why do you have to do that? Like, why do you have to be the person who does the kickoff calls? They're like, well, I always do them. That's what it's always been. I've always done them. And I'm like, okay, but just because you've always done them doesn't actually mean that you need to do them. And I said to this person, is it really essential? And they said, well, I could delegate it, but I don't know how the clients would take that. And again, it comes back to fear. It comes back to the mindset of how will this be perceived? How will it be received by the clients? So this means a couple examples here for you. If you're someone that has wall-to-wall discovery calls on your calendar, you've got coaching calls, strategy sessions, client check-ins, these are going to be some solutions for you. Number one, if you're a one-on-one coach who feels like you do constant calls with every single client, one of the things that is important is to look at what are the recurring tasks that you do with most people that are not one-off coaching or one-off discussions. And with that, how can we create a level of self-paced or resources for someone to go through? So for example, one of the things as a one-on-one coach myself that I do is I triage people's businesses to basically say, here's what we're going to focus on in this order, and we're doing so for the following reasons, and here's how we're going to approach it. Well, example, what if I created, using my intellectual property, an AI resource that allowed them to put in what their to-do list was or their ideas were, and it triages it the same way that I would, right? So like these are ways to feel like I'm not having to do maybe say the intensive part of one-on-one. If it was triaging, I have a resource to be able to do that. If, like I said, you do every kickoff or onboarding call, two different things to think about. Do you potentially create a onboarding mini course for your clients to go through that asks a series of questions and walks them through that to basically have their strategy built by the end? Also with AI, there's a lot of resources that we can do for this now. The other alternative, which I'm doing for another agency right now because their CEO is planning for mat leave, is we have a manager, a client success manager, who's literally in this moment being trained on how to run these kickoff calls and these check-in calls with clients for their results. So until now, it's always been the CEO, but the reality is the CEO can't do it. The CEO is not going to be around. So we have to make sure that we have someone there to be accountable to that. If you are somebody that also personally reviews deliverables, this is really great for my agency owners here. If you're someone who reviews deliverables of clients, of your team, and gives feedback on things to people, you can also have potentially team review sessions, which basically is where you're going through on a call with people and auditing, and all that auditing gets put into a system, a structure, a framework to not allow that one piece to be audited, but allow every piece after it to also be audited against the same structure. And you can also, which I did for another bookkeeping agency. They were finding that they were going in and auditing things for clients. And I said to her, tell me what you're auditing. And what we discovered was that the thing that she was assessing was literally the equivalent of a checklist. So I said, you're redoing this checklist that you're doing over and over and over again, when realistically, we could just give that checklist to someone else on your team and it's going to come from your brain. So they're going to look for the things that you're looking for, but we're going to do it in a way that doesn't require you to be present. Think about the outcome of what you're trying to achieve: feedback, review, audit, any of those pieces. And then once we have that, then we want to think about, okay, great, what's the process of what we need to change? Because the process is what we're looking to adjust, not the outcome. Many people, when we look at maternity leave, we're looking at, okay, well, how do I just change all these outcomes? You can still get social out. You can still support clients. You can still have kickoff calls. All the business operations, 9 times out of 10, can still be maintained and can still happen. They're just going to look different than you've been doing them. They're going to look like a revision to it, an edit to it, a refinement to it. And once we get innovative and creative about the process, that is when you're going to actually start to see, okay, wow, this can be done without me needing to be deeply involved in every step. So delegation is the next thing, and understanding, okay, if we have first understanding, how do I make sure my business doesn't require me to live in the delivery of it? The second is the delegation map that is basically built months in advance. Obviously, any plan for maternity leave can be made last minute, but if I ever have like my dream wave a magic wand scenario, I'm always going to look to try to have a little bit more of a heads up. Ideally, I would love to have minimum 3 months, but if I had 6 months, we're cooking. 9 months, 12 months. Some people I'm planning for right now, they're not even pregnant yet, but they are planning on becoming pregnant in the next year. And so that's why we're using this time really intentionally. Everything that we build, everything we create is designed with her having a baby in mind. So you want to think about delegation then, which is identify in your business every task, every responsibility, every project that runs through you. Okay. So this is not just in delivery now, this is in everything. And what I want you to do is to assign a specific person or assign a specific process that will allow that to replace you, or at least identify if it could replace you. Because if it can't, then it helps us to problem solve on what we need to get support for or make a plan for. But what it looks like in practice is take a task. Okay. So replying to client messages, posting to Instagram 3 times a week, handling refund requests, running our Tuesday group call, right? So think about the literal list of the stuff that requires you. And I want you to just mark all of that onto a piece of paper. Get a big brain dump of all the things that require you. Okay. Then what I want you to do is right now, you're going to look at, what do you currently do? So for each of those things, like even let's just say it's a kickoff call. How do you facilitate it? How do you open it? What questions do you ask? What are things you're looking at? What do you need to prepare? What are next steps after the call? Do you send anything to the client? I want you to think and just brain dump. Honestly, one of the greatest resources for this is literally just sit down with these lists of things that you do and go one by one and voice message into AI and ask it to summarize it into a framework for you and into a streamlined phased process. This will literally help you to take a lot of what's living in your brain and a lot of what you do on autopilot and actually make this into a process that could be handed to somebody. Part of the reason that a lot of businesses can't be delegated properly is because a lot of them aren't documented properly. So if you don't have documentation, you can't delegate it. It means that if you delegate it, you're kind of hoping the person wings it in the same way that you want it done, which is always a disaster and very rarely actually gets you the result you want. So you get the task list for each one, you voice message and brain dump to get an outline of your process flow for each of those things. So then we're going to have a process, then we have to ask ourselves, who's the person? So who's the backup owner of a specific person, your VA, your marketing lead, your contractor on your team, and have you given those people documentation to step in on your behalf to know what to do? Because if someone is going on maternity leave and they go, oh, well, I have refund requests or I have failed payments. The reality is you don't have to be the person who navigates failed payments. I haven't myself navigated failed payments in my own business for multiple years now. When someone has a failed payment, they're not getting a message from me. They're getting a message from my team. And that's because they've been given a process of how to contact the person, how to follow up with them, how to message them, what to do if they don't answer. Like they've been given a process, and only if all that process fails, then do they message me, which is why I really have not been involved in a failed payment in a very long time. So I'm still in the business. I'm not on maternity leave. I'm still here testing and using my systems now because I know I want to have a family in the future. So we want to look at also doing a test. One of the things that I think is a really, really big mistake of many women who are planning for maternity leave is that they don't actually test the system. They're pressure testing the system a week before they log off. And what what I said to someone is, obviously, fingers crossed, we want everything to go perfectly to plan. But the reality is baby could come early, which means I don't want you testing your system of will this business work a week before you're due. So the idea is several weeks before baby's even due, our goal is to test and pressure test the system to find where there is a disconnect, where is there a leak, where are things not as refined or streamlined as you want them to be. And similar to myself, for a lot of women, if we have the heads up, if we have the runway to know that you want to have a family, to know that you want to grow your family, and you know that now, let's use the time now. If you are someone who's having maybe your second or your third baby and you're thinking, man, I don't want to relive my first one, that was really crazy with work, this is the moment to get that stuff in place, to be able to get that structure, that strategy in place, which is similar to, as I was saying, with failed payments for me. Part of why I'm starting to flex these muscles now, to flex the muscle of giving away the podcast and letting someone own that, to flex the muscle of giving away Instagram and letting someone own that. And so I'm really conscious of what right now does require my face and my voice, and one by one creating a process and testing those now to get them into place. The other thing that is a big question mark constantly that everyone asks when it comes to maternity leave, if your question with maternity leave is, how do I tell people? I want to explain to you that there is not a right or wrong way, okay? The only wrong way to tell someone that you're going on mat leave is if you are somebody who is going to have a massive impact to your clients in going on maternity leave and you don't tell them until a week before. That's the only thing that I would say is really not advised. The thing is, I have questions from people who say, okay, when do I have to announce it on social media? You don't. I literally know an entrepreneur and I love her to pieces. She was pregnant, had a baby, and came back to business. Her audience didn't even know she took time off. They didn't know she had a baby. They're like, wait a second, when did you have a baby? Because they're like freaking out about the fact, they're like, how did I not know this? She filled all her content from literally her chest up. She never told her audience she was pregnant. She had the baby, came back from the baby, and they were none the wiser. And I share this because we have this assumption that we owe other people answers, that we owe other people our information. If you decide that you don't want to share the fact that you had a baby or that you're having a baby with your audience or with your clients, you don't have to, as long as your clients will still continue to be served and not be impacted. If your clients are going to be impacted in some way, then you do need to let them know in some capacity that you're having a baby. Now, one of the things that is a big fear, as we noted, is, okay, well, then clients are going to leave. I don't want to tell them, because if I tell my audience on social media that I'm having a baby, nobody's going to want to sign with me because they're going to think that I'm having a baby. Therefore, I don't want to sign with her because it'll be too much, etc. On the contrast, there's also this opinion that if I tell clients that I'm having a baby, they're not going to want to renew. They're not going to want to work with us. And if I'm going to be honest, any person who is a client of yours or a potential client of yours who doesn't want to work with you because you're having a family is potentially not even a client, in my opinion, that you even want to be working with in the first place. Okay, let's just call that. Because if somebody is seeing that you want to become a mom and you becoming a mom is a deterrent of why they're going to want to hire you, red flag, red flag. Do not work with that person. Like, the thing that an audience wants to know or your client wants to know is that in some respect you have a plan. All clients care about when they're working with you is that they are supported and that they're going to get the outcomes that they had pre-baby the same way they're going to get outcomes post-baby. So when you're thinking about how do I approach clients, remember, the clients are not as invested in the process of what it looks like. They should be invested in the results or the outcome that they're looking to generate. So this looks like you need to decide what is your comfort level. Similar to this client, one of them said, I'm not going to tell anybody, and she didn't. And she worked her plan and nobody was the wiser. On the contrast though, you can also be somebody who says, hey, I want to tell my audience and I want to share it and I want to make this part of my content and my brand, which is also totally okay as well. The thing is, you want to look at announcing at some point where it impacts your clients. That's really the main measure. Whether you tell marketing or social media, I don't really care. I don't think that really matters. It's a personal preference. It's more with clients, I would say, that it's mainly impactful. Again, if it's impacting their service. So first, I would say messaging your clients and letting them know, probably I would say around 3 months before is fine. Like, I think outside of that is kind of up to you if you want to. You don't have to. But I think under the 3 months, 2 months mark is typically when I would want clients to probably know if they're going to be impacted, i.e. if there's a big change to their service or their support structure. So with this, you send an email, which is typically structured saying a couple different things. You're going to be going on maternity leave from this date to this date. If they should need to reach you, how do they do that? Do they have an option to reach you? What does that look like to get in contact with you? And what are some of the adjustments to their service that are going to be happening, and who's going to be taking responsibility for those? What are they going to look like? How do they get support in those areas? The thing that I have seen time and time again is with a well-crafted message to clients don't care. Clients want to know, is my social going to go out? Is my strategy still going to be effective? Am I still going to get results? If all those three things are going to happen, the only reason that someone's going to have resistance to you stepping back and team stepping in is if your client doesn't have trust in your team. And if your client doesn't have trust in your team, you have to ask yourself why that is. Because if your client doesn't have trust, it's probably for a very understandable logistical reason, i.e., has this team member that you're going to be passing it off to dropped the ball before? Has this person generated lack of results when they were the person who was involved? These are things you want to start to think through. If you're not confident to give your clients to your team, is it because you don't actually feel like your clients should be confident in your team? Are you not confident in your team, right? So we start to want to unpack these areas. Then we want to look at, for active clients specifically, you want to always tell your clients right now before social media or anyone knows. So that's a very obvious, I think, rule of thumb, but I'm stating it here clearly. You should never be announcing something on social before you've announced it to your clients. And that's because they are the paying clients inside of your ecosystem, and they typically should be the first to be contacted. And when you are someone who drafts and schedules this announcement, and I recommend doing and scheduling this announcement a couple months before, again, you're going to go off, because in the event, like I was mentioning, that client had 32 clients and 2 of them decided not to continue as a result of this information. What we really discovered is that those 2 clients were not in the service for the service. They were in the service because they wanted one specific person to be the person who headlines and was the energizer bunny behind the curtain for them. And if that person was to be removed at any point, that would be the reason that they wouldn't continue. So we lost 2 out of 32 people with this announcement though. So again, by knowing that 3 months prior, we were able to replace those clients before my client even went on mat leave. So you want to think about, how am I doing this announcement? And do I feel like I'm approaching it with intention? Do I know who I'm messaging about this announcement? Why I'm messaging those people? What timeline I'm doing that in? So these are things that we start to discuss and that we start to think about. As well, leave and going on maternity leave should not be the moment that you start to build financial runway. Okay. So if you are someone who's at this place where you are realizing, okay, wow, like I'm going to need some money here to be able to be off, typically the moment that you have a child is not the time to be thinking about that. If you are someone as an entrepreneur who knows that you want to have a family today, or you want to expand your family today, this is where we want to be really intentional about, are you structuring your behind the curtain of your business in an intentional way to allow you that financial buffer? Because oftentimes I see people that, not even a matter they didn't have the money, like their business was making good money. But what I found was that they were operating with the business's money in such a way that made it very strenuous, very strained financially. And so it means if they had just had even 6 months prior, a little bit more savings behind them, or a little bit more time to collect savings, it would have made a massive night and day difference of what they would have felt going into maternity leave. So what I tell people is to calculate your average monthly cost and then multiply that by your planned leave. So if you plan, let's just say, to take 3 months, I would love for you to have those 3 months of operating expenses, even including your own compensation, because then it means that in the event you want to come back earlier, great. And if you also take the full time, great. For other people, they want to take 6 months. So it means that you need technically 6 months of your overall cost for the business to have there as a float for yourself, which generally speaking, by the way, you should be having around 3 to 6 months of operating expenses sitting in your business bank account untouched, regardless of whether you have kids or not. It's considered a great runway that once you start making consistent money should be a focus, not even just for having kids, but also for, just to be honest, the volatility of the market and online and of the world and all of these pieces, just to have it as a safety buffer. But then what you want to do is, in the event of knowing that you're going to be off, you want to try to start putting and depositing money into that account to try to get as close to that number as you can. It's not going to be perfect, especially for some people. If you're in this stage right now where you are wanting to have a family or expand your family and you're like, my business isn't making enough in order to be able to put in that perfect number of what I'd love it to be, then we have a couple things to think about. We have to think about, okay, well, can we be strategic in getting guidance to make more money to allow you to have no issue in doing that? Or is there a possibility here where we just need to be able to reduce cost, and we have to really think about, if your personal desire to have a a family or start a family is in the conversation right now and the business can't afford it, are you at a place where you're interested in restructuring the business, i.e. reducing cost to be able to afford it? Or is there a conversation to be had here about the fact that we could easily afford it if we were making more money? And I find for most businesses, that's true. They look at how can we reduce, but the other question I ask is, well, if you literally add 10 grand a month more, your plan is easy, like non-issue. So then the question becomes, why are we not looking to add 10 grand more? Why are we looking to reduce 10 grand a month, right? So I think it's also asking those intentional questions, because that's also, to be honest, why a lot of women hire me in this stage, is because you can use this time leading up to going off to be in a place where you have more than enough money to go on mat leave, more than enough in the bank account to be able to make all of your dreams and your vision come true. So I recommend running the calculation, doing so. If you can, obviously, perfect scenario, if you can do this before you even have a baby, beautiful. But obviously, if you're in a place where you're like, that's not possible right now, we have the info, I got to make a plan now, then it means that we want to try to get understanding of what is the vision of how much you need to have and how can we start to build up that float for you and that savings for you. The reality is that everything up until right now in your business is preparation. Like right now, I am in preparation. As soon as you decide, in my opinion, that you are someone who wants to be a mom or you want to have a bigger family, that's the moment. That's the awareness that you say, okay, well, if I know I want to be a mom, I better get planning, right? I better get to it. And a lot of us can get into this idea of someday, eventually, at one point. And the reality is, if you're someone as a woman, you want to have a family and you are the breadwinner and you are potentially even a personal brand or the face of the brand, having a really supportive maternity leave is going to come down just to planning. That's all it comes down to. It's just planning. And everything that you do in your business right now, even before you even try for children, or if you're not trying right now, similar to myself, I'm not trying right now, but I know and I have the full clarity that I want to be a mom in whatever way that happens for me, God willing. And what I recognize is that no matter when it happens or how it happens, the way that I structure my business right now is the thing that determines how easy that's going to be. If I make every single thing need me, I'm going to always be needed. If I make every single month of the business require tons of expenses in order to operate, it means I'm putting only future pressure on myself, right? So I'm really intentional about how I build now because I recognize the vision. We also look at this with businesses. You'd never build a business for a vision 3 to 5 years from now that you didn't want. So why, knowing that you want to be a mom, that you want to have a family 3 to 5 years from now, are we building a business that needs all of these things that you don't want to be true in order for you to do that, right? Your business not needing you in every single waking moment is proof that you are a good CEO, that you are a good operator, that you are someone who's thinking of these scenarios and not needed in every single moment in order for it to function. That just means that you are strategic, that you're intentional, that you're thinking through things. It's such a positive thing. And yet I think this idea of, oh, well, I taught my business to run without me, that's not a bad thing. It means you're actually good at what you do when it comes to strategy. And a strong business in general, whether for maternity leave or for something totally unrelated, you could get sick, you could have an accident, you could have a family member who has an accident. With all of these things, the thing that we have to recognize is that a good business does not collapse the moment that you step back. So when you are creating this business to not collapse the moment that you step back, that is, in my opinion, full indication that you really know what you're doing, that you're building this intentionally. Yes, it can be a great dopamine spike and it can be really validating and be like, this business needs me and it needs me to function. But the reality is a good business doesn't need you to function. A good business doesn't need you in every moment in order for it to operate. There is with this also, most importantly, us allowing there to be both. As women, we have to give ourselves the permission that we are allowed to be ambitious and driven and have massive goals and a lot of drive and a lot of dreams and visions of what we want to create and want to be present with our child. This conversation is something I want to talk about because there is no universal plan. I think that a lot of us as women are like, okay, yeah, how are women doing it? How are entrepreneurs doing it? They're doing it the way they want to do it. Today was to give you something to allow you to have food for thought around what is my plan? Why is that my plan? Where does that come from? Am I comparing it? What's my vision? What's my support system? What's my financial reality? There's all these questions that only you have the answers to and that oftentimes are very custom and specific to you, your vision, and your circumstances. So the other thing I want to give you is a permission slip that nothing is quote unquote right or wrong. There's no right amount of time. There's no right version of maternity leave. There's no right perspective of how involved or not involved you should be. There's no right or wrong to any of this. The thing that there is a right and wrong to is how this feels for you. If it doesn't feel right for you to have a baby and come back 4 weeks later, don't do it. And if it doesn't feel right for you to have a baby and come back 2 years or a year later, don't do it. The thing that I wanted to invite you to is whether your due date is in the next month, okay? And if so, congratulations. And if your due date is in the next coming months listening to this, or you are just in the process of thinking about the fact that you want to have a family and you're starting to think about these topics for yourself, what I want you to do is, of our conversation today, there's probably something that I said that allowed you to go, ooh, yeah, the check-in calls do require me. Or yeah, I feel like my content process is really not going to be supportive when I have kids. Or yeah, I realize that every refund or every onboarding requires me. Whatever that structure is that you feel is the bottleneck, pick that thing. And I want you to do two things. I want you to, number one, look at what could a process look like for that if you documented it. So again, where are you involved in that? What's the process of it? So map out the milestones, the steps, the overview, and then ask yourself, in the event that I wanted to get a person to help me with that, what would it look like? In the event that I could use a process to do that for me, or AI, if I wanted to have AI support with that, what would that look like? And that is where we start. Because as I said, this is not going to be that I'm going to overhaul every section of your business. Typically, these are tiny little tweaks and refinements that are already sitting inside your current business ecosystem right now, that if we make adjustments to it, can give you the maternity leave that you've wanted, to give you the maternity leave that you want to give yourself as an option, even if you don't use all the time that you think you might want or may have. So I want to recognize that, obviously, as I said, I am somebody who does not have kids, but I am somebody that helps a lot of my clients to do exactly what I just talked about, to make plans for these, to understand the numbers, to understand the strategy, understand the processes, the team, all the ingredients of what are necessary to give you the version of what you want. Reality is that as women, we're taught a lot to look at things a certain way, that this is what it's going to look like, and the plan is going to be this. The best part of why you started your business is so that you could be in the driver's seat, so that you could determine, what do I want my business to look like? How many hours do I want to work? What do I want my marketing to look like? I will tell you, as somebody who builds scaling strategies all day, every day, the thing that I can guarantee you is all of it works. All of it works. And it's just a matter of making it work for you. So there's not a one strategy that's effective. There's not a one plan, a one structure, a one timeline. All of them work. They just need different ingredients in order for them to work. So what I want you to decide on is, what is your vision? And two, what is one thing right now that you are worried you're the bottleneck of if you want to step away? And that's where we start. So I hope today was helpful for you. For any of you who are expecting, congratulations again. If you're listening to this being like, this is so helpful for me because baby's due in 3 months, 6 months, whatever it may be. And also for any of you similar to myself that just know that you want to be a mom and that time is not here yet, but you really want to make sure that you're prepared. Thank you for tuning in today. This is going to be something that I will tell you will definitely have you leaps and bounds ahead when the time comes for you to have your family. So I will see you on next week's episode. And as always, stay ambitious.